Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I'm very happy to announce that Haggadat Hapesah has been released. It is here. This is a copy. Many people have already received their copies. 1,000 of them have been printed. Uh, about 30 of them have been delivered to their purchasers. For those of you here in the land of Israel who have ordered, it's in the mail. The mail here is a little bit slow. It takes some time before the mail is picked up from Kochav Yaakov, but God willing, by this time next week, you will have your Haggadot. It should be in stores also in places beyond Kochav Yaakov. It should be hitting stores in America in February and various places in and around Israel, God willing, around Purim time. So if you'd like a copy before that, don't forget, fill out the forms, go online, contact me, and we'll try to help you out or come and visit. We're also trying to go to a number of places to speak about the book. And that's what I'm here right now to talk about. See, it's just great. By the way, props to the Rebbitzin who designed the cover and the layout of the book. It's quite nice inside. First, the thing about the colors we chose, Techelet and Argamon, a shade of blue that invokes the color of the Techelet, which is supposed to be on the tzitzit. That's classical parts of the Haggadah that stayed as is are that color. That's also the main color on the cover. But then when we have the parts that have been altered in a good way because now the Korban Pesach is on the table, so those are in purple as you can see here. For example, this blessing is changed because it reflects the God willing new reality we will experience in the coming months. So let us begin. First of all, Haggadat Pesach is preceded by what I call the Kuntris HaMakdim, a number of ideas that I was writing about in the last 4 years or so. It began with the drasha I gave the synagogue one Shabbos, and it basically snowballed from there. And as some of you may or may not have seen already, the outtakes, the parts of that long drasha that are not really relevant to Passover. They have to do with the holidays in Tishrei and right before Tishrei. Those already have been included in their own booklet entitled Hallelujah B'Teika Shofar, and more of them are to be released in an upcoming kuntris called HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, which is about Rosh Chodesh, and also little vertlach about the Shabbos. And the fourth book will be Matzah Chen Bamidbar, which is a commentary on the book of Numbers. Bamidbar is the name of the book of Numbers in Hebrew. Matzah Chen Bamidbar is dedicated to my wife. Those of you can get the reference. And it should be of similar length, possibly longer. We have to see. Many of the ideas that will appear in that book, I've already written extensively about in English, and you could find quite a lot of literature about that on the blog. And there'll be more. There'll, of course, be lots of new material, and we're very excited about that. So the four booklets, totaling, I think, just shy of 200 pages or so, will be printed separately. The first has already hit the stores, and Haggadat Pesach contains the first of them, the first of the booklets. The second booklet was printed independently. The third and fourth ones are on the way. So what do we have here in Haggadat Pesach? Let's talk about it. First of all, we have to present the Seder as is. Looking at this one, this is it's very pretty. Just opening it up, it stands out for how nice it looks. I'm just so surprised. And here we have the new Passover Seder. That's the first thing. Many are familiar with Kadesh Urchatz, perhaps a nursery rhyme-like tune. They used to remember it. So we wanted to maintain the same number of main headings. There's Kadesh Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, etc. We have removed Yachatz because Yachatz, this is one of the first things I tell people, Yachatz is when we break one of those matzot right at the beginning of the Seder, and we put some away to be used as the afikoman, which is going to be the matzah that we eat at the end of the Seder in place of the Korban Pesach. And there is a Korban Pesach, so we don't have the Afikoman, so we don't have Yachatz, and we will leave the matzahs whole until the time comes to actually eat them. Of course, there is an idea, a Talmudic idea, which Rambam takes quite literally. Maimonides takes this literally. It says lechem oni means that the bread is poor. So whereas on most Sabbaths and festivals, we recite the blessing on the bread over 2 whole cakes, 2 whole loaves of bread, whatever form of bread you have, they still should be whole. And then we break the bread after the blessing, we begin eating it. In this case, the bread should be broken before the blessing upon the commandment to eat the bread is done, and that's how we do it. So in this case, up until now, people have been breaking the bread well in advance at the beginning of Magid. That's the Achatz. The Maimonidean view is, and apparently this is the way the halacha should be, is if you have the matzot whole until comes time to eat them, then you break them and then you recite the blessing. And of course, for those of you who are familiar with all the various art scroll editions of the Haggadah, which bring the practice of great 19th century and 20th century Lidfish Rabbanim, you'll see that they all happen to have this practice that they would, sorry, I'm just going to adjust the chair, they would all only have 2 matzot at their Seder, not 3. And there's a reason for that, because the 3rd matzah is actually quite a later innovation, and it is a yeshivish practice. By yeshiva, I mean old Litvish yeshiva, already dating from the Vilna Gaon, who reinstituted this idea that you only actually have 2 matzot. And so that explains Haggadat Pesach, and that is, we bring in, that means the presentation of the Passover. The way Maimonides has it, after they do Kadesh and Urchatz, Kadesh is the Kiddush, of course, and Urchatz is washing the hands in advance of Karpas, we actually bring in the Korban Pesach before Karpas, and we talk a little bit about the Korban Pesach. When the bread is broken originally, in the Seders we used to do in the olden days, so the head of the Seder, the one leading the Seder, would take the broken matzah, the piece that he has not put away for the afikoman, and he would show it and describe it as the poor bread, or the bread of affliction that we ate in the land of Egypt. And that's interesting, because he then starts inviting others who are needy to join us at the table. And technically speaking, this is perhaps something that should be modified at least a little bit, perhaps even left out entirely. First of all, you can't invite new people to the Seder. The Korban Pesach may only be eaten in the company and by those who have pre-registered for the Korban Pesach. There's something called the Minuyim. Minuyim are those who are registered. Before the animal is slaughtered, it has to be officially recognized, perhaps in writing. Although if Shabbos is Erev Pesach, it's kind of difficult to know how exactly they would officially record this. But it has to be certain who is officially going to be eating from this particular animal on the night of Passover. And that's something that the ones in charge of preparing the Passover need to be aware of. So the Passover may be slaughtered by anybody who's a kosher Jew, qualified to slaughter, not necessarily a priest. The blood has to be caught by a priest and thrown on the altar in the proper manner. And then the entrails have to be burned on the altar, and the rest of the Passover, the animal is basically taken whole without its entrails, without its blood, and without its forbidden fats, and it's supposed to be roasted. And once again, it can only be eaten by those people who pre-registered. Now, once the Passover is to be eaten, the registered participants can actually break apart into smaller groups called haburot. Okay, havurot without a dot in the bed. I said that wrong. Habura, so we know, is a wound. Say havurot. So those are the groups of people who each eat their Passover, and they basically define where the group sits, defines the place of eating, and it actually has to have mechitzot, barriers or divisions, a set defined place of eating with halachic mechitzot. Mechitzot, as we saw in laws of Eruvin, more importantly in Sukkot, that has to be of a certain height, certain dimensions, and it has to make a certain enclosure. So the Passover needs to be eaten in a room, for example, or in a closed courtyard, and the people of that chavurah are not allowed to bring the Passover out of that particular place. Once it's there, they are one chavurah. Now, all the minuyim can make one chavurah, or a Passover can be divided into as many chavurot as necessary. You could have 100 people who are registered to eat from this Passover, and they can divide into, let's say, 10 chavurot. But once they do that, they should not mix. Once they've each taken their piece of the meat, or their pieces of the meat, and they're sitting in their place, they have to stay there. So you cannot be inviting people over to join you for Passover. It doesn't work that way, and especially at this point. So we would leave out the invitation part of halach ma'anya. We've replaced that with a line in Aramaic, or you could say it in Hebrew, which describes what the Korban Pesach is, and then a section which is taken from the Mishnah Torah. The Rambam's clearly explained laws of what to do with the Korban Pesach, and Rambam, as was his tradition, or as was his custom, and also his very good idea, he would write in the Mishnaic language. So it's also quite easy to understand. It has a nice ring to it. It has also that meter that is you could find in the rest of the Haggadah. And that's what we do. We read about the Korban Pesach, and then of course we have Karpas. And then we have a little bit of a line left from Halach Manya, and like I've written, I don't know necessarily if we should talk about the matzah at this point in the same terms. I left in that line. You say Halach Ma'anya, this is the bread of affliction, or the poor bread that our ancestors used to eat in the land of Egypt. And then we have the Manish Tana. And there's an extra question there, like it's in the Mishnah. The child is supposed to ask also, why on this night are we only eating why are we only eating roasted meat? On our nights we could eat our meat any way we want. Yes, there's a specific commandment not to eat of the Korban Pesach in any way but roasted, and there's a specific commandment to eat it roasted. The sages say, despite what some people have suggested in later times, Achronim, Rishonim, etc., the sages have said that the reason for this is to preserve the taste of the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach, unlike most of the sacrifices, the ikar, right? The main point of this sacrifice is not the atonement. The atonement is what's affected by throwing the blood and burning the fats on the altar. In this case, even though that is done with the Korban Pesach, the main point is that it should be eaten. And there's actually a few halachic ramifications behind that. The first of all is that you have to eat the Korban Pesach roasted to preserve the taste. And another one is that, I just forgot it. Okay, it's that this is the only sacrifice that is brought when a majority of the people or the priests are ritually impure. That means ritually impure with contamination from contact with the dead. That is eaten. That is, the temple service goes on as normal. Well, it's supposed to go on as normal, even if a majority of the populace or the priests are ritually contaminated. Except that the parts of the sacrifices that are normally eaten, for example, sin offerings, etc., are not eaten. They were just burned, and ceremonially burned, of course, like as though they were leftover meat. Leftover meat of the sacrifices is burned after its expiration time. So the Korban Pesach is unique in that even if the people are bringing it because a majority of them are contaminated, they're bringing it in this undesirable state, the meat is still eaten. And that's a very big surprise, and that's also explicit in the Mishnayot, and an idea because the Korban Pesach needs to be eaten. My thesis at the beginning of the book is that explains why, for example, we have this very strange phenomenon that when we can't eat the Korban Pesach, as we have in years past, instead, when it comes time to eat the Korban Pesach, we just eat another piece of matzah. And that is seemingly odd because eating the matzah is a separate commandment altogether, and we've already fulfilled that commandment. And also there is a whole wealth of halachic precedent that when a sacrifice cannot be brought, or the ritual of the sacrifice cannot be done as it is supposed to be, we make that up by studying the laws of the sacrifice. There's a number of places in the Talmud that explains, in the Mishnah also, and in the Midrash, that Nishalma Farim Sifathenu, we recite the various passages. And this is done both in the Tzibur, that is with a quorum of 10 men. This is the idea behind a lot of the Musaf prayers on holidays and on the Sabbaths. It's also the idea behind an individual who, for example, wants to bring a sin offering. So he is to study the various halachic passages about sin offerings, and then it is as though he has brought a sin offering. And then the Haggadah continues, mostly unchanged, especially Magid section, but I will make note of the parts that are essentially new, or at least renewed. There's also commentary, by the way, on the Magid, which is good. I've invested a lot of time in preparing it. I hope that it finds favor in the eyes of the community. There's a new section here, the Drash. There's a section that makes up the bulk of Magid, is taken from the end of Deuteronomy, and it's read verse by verse, and then each verse is taken apart and explained. Arami Oved Avi. My father was made a refugee by an Aramean. It says Lavan sought to destroy Yaakov Avinu, but he did worse than Pharaoh. And the last verse is normally left out. Rabbi Weber, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat HaMikdash, who has done me and our readers a very great favor. He has reviewed the entire Haggadah and has made many suggestions, many of which have been incorporated into the Haggadah. Only very few did not make it in. He has my deepest gratitude for his efforts, and he has left his mark on the Haggadah in this, that he's pointed out the original drash is taken from the Sifrei. So this part, when we talk about the last pasuk, Vayivi'enu al makom hazeh, and he brought us to this place, is also explained. And then we have the Dayenu, which hasn't changed. And there's a slight line here, Pesach sha'anu ochlim, this Passover that we are eating now, al shumma. That's been highlighted. The blessing Ga'al Yisrael, which concludes Magid, has also been thankfully updated. Previously, it included a prayer that, God willing, in years to come, we be able to eat the sacrificial meats. And now they're on the table. So that prayer has been omitted. And the rest of the prayers, instead of being in future tense, is written in present tense. We thank you for redeeming us. And that's how it is. You should go check it out. God willing, by the way, we're looking for sponsors for the English edition. If anybody knows someone who really wants this to see the light of day, please have him contact me. And then we have the fun parts, the more eating. We have motzi, matzah, and maror. And as has been pointed out by many, Maimonides' opinion is that if you actually have Korban Pesach on the table, that means the consumption of the maror is a biblical obligation and not a rabbinic obligation. When the Pesach is absent, there is no biblical commandment to eat maror, just matzah. But the sages still instituted that maror be eaten. And Maimonides says once maror is a biblical commandment on the same level of the commandment to eat the matzah, then one could technically eat the two together in order to fulfill his commandment. And that's why we have korech. It's not its own stage in the Seder, that is the order. It is an option, motzi, matzah, and maror, or you can combine them and make one blessing upon eating your sandwich. It says in the Tosefta, the older versions say that Hillel was the one who actually ate all three together. Hillel ate Pesach, matzah, and maror, and it says shloshtam in case it's ambiguous. Some say korech, matzah, and maror. How do you know it's Pesach, matzah, and maror? Because the word shloshtam is there, all three of them together. They're all biblical commandments, and he would eat all of them together in one sandwich. We used to memorialize this, but the sages also rule that one cannot actually do like Hillel. That's his own opinion, and the sages believe that if one were to take the three biblical consumptions all at once, then it would actually be hard to distinguish the taste. Once again, that because eating is the main point of this, and the tastes would cancel each other out or cover each other up, whatever the sages meant by that. And therefore, one may not actually make a sandwich of Pesach matzah maror, although he may eat the Pesach any way he chooses. Once it's been roasted, he can eat it with any condiments as long as they're kosher for Passover, I guess, and that is perfectly within his rights. Perhaps it's even considered a better way of fulfilling the commandment, not just eat the Pesach as it is. And we've included also Chagigah, God willing. There's another offering that's supposed to be part of this ritual, and that is the Chagigah. If it's, for example, perhaps on certain Sabbaths, other days, or when there was enough meat to go around, the Chagigah was not brought. Hold on one second. We have questions coming in. Okay. That's about the Korban. That's about the Haggadah. Thank God. When it rains, it pours. There isn't much to do. Like I said, God willing, if you are looking for a store where to find the Haggadah Pesach, I'll try to advertise exactly where to find them. Hopefully the distributors will also advertise. We were discussing this. The Chagigah, sometimes there it's eaten before the Korban Pesach. We make a note also that you could technically eat your Korban Pesach at different points within the meal. The sages said it should be the last thing you eat. So if one has but one olive's worth of, that means an olive-size amount of Korban Pesach, you should wait till the very end to eat it. Then we have the Birkat of the meals, which has also been adjusted. God willing, the Messiah will be here, and we will have this, and the text has to be updated in that case. There's more text also. The prayers for that God take out his vengeance or his wrath upon the Gentile oppressors is also not befitting when one is eating the Korban Pesach in the rebuilt Jerusalem in a Messianic era. And instead, the prayer is for that God guide the hearts of mankind back to his service. The Jewish idea, to fix the world and make it a demonstration of the kingdom of the Almighty. And then all flesh shall call upon his name. Idolatry will disappear, and mankind will join together, all peoples with each other, to worship the one God. And that will usher in a utopian age. And that is what we believe, and that's why we've included these prayers before the Hallel. The Hallel is as it is. I've spent a lot of time trying to break it apart according to the Trup. The Trup is not included, although there's a series of articles online where I discuss the Trups of, that is, the cantillation marks of the books of Tehillim, Mishlei, and Eov, Psalms, Job, and Proverbs. And I've broken it apart phrase by phrase so that it can be read and inflected in the right way. I did this myself. And I disagree in some places with the major ones who've done it before me, Rav Breuer and the Riachi edition published by Feldheim. I've taken issue with some of them. I'm willing to defend why, and I believe that someone were to study the Trup and also try to use this at his Seder, will see that this is the correct way to break it apart. And Birkat Hashir, which the sages say is the conclusion of Hallel, the blessing that's said at the end of the Hallel, is given its own pride of place. That's also to make sure that there's enough sections to make up for the number of sections that there used to be in years past. And that's also broken apart phrase by phrase, so that's easy to read and understood, and perhaps also to fit the tunes. And then the Bracha Mein Shalosh has also been updated. That's the Bracha Achrona. Nirtzah is also updated, and one will find certain piyutim there, other biblical passages that are very befitting. I recommend everybody look them over, read the explanations as to why I chose to include them, and that, I would say that's it. But I can't possibly go through all the different commentaries we have here, or the comments we have on the Haggadah Pesach. I can only tell you, thank you for all of those who have made this happen, friends and family, most importantly my parents and my in-laws and their parents, for their support. And hopefully we will all, God willing, merit to use this Haggadah this year and everywhere together in Jerusalem. Have a Shabbat Shalom.